Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Like I mentioned in our intro, today we have someone that I'm super psyched to have on here. Someone I've grown up listening to their music. I've really watched the way that they've built their band as a very ethically sound, super cool business that has allowed them to live off their art. So it's a huge honor to have him here today. Welcome to the show, Armand.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, man, there's so much I want to talk to you about today, from Sick of It All to Rest in Pieces to Straight Ahead to, everything about New York hardcore. I could geek out about all this stuff from just a fun perspective for hours with you. But the thing that I'm really interested in talking about is just like Sick of It All, in my opinion, patient zero. I believe that Sick of It All was the first band that figured out how to make their passion a living while also still saying super cool, super relevant, and ethical. Like you stayed who you really were the whole time. And that's really what I want to talk about today. And my first question for you is I just want to know about you. So tell us a bit about where you grew up, how you grew up, and what led you to the punk scene.
Well, I was born in Iran, in Tehran. My father's Iranian, my mom is American. And, during my childhood, I was always kind of searching for the most aggressive music. Anytime I heard a hard rock song on the radio, for example, even in Iran, the music would make its way over there. And everything that was heavy caught my ear, and we would spend summers in the States visiting with my American grandparents in Queens. So I would do a whole lot of record buying and getting my hands on whatever kind of music that I could, and it was always going for the hard rock or heavy metal from the 70s, Black Sabbath, Alice Cooper, Deep Purple, Judas Priest. Things kind of progressed with time into things like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, stuff like that. But that was also around the time when I was leaving Iran. So, after the revolution happened and after the Islamic Republic was put into power over there, we realized that we had to leave. So we made our way out of there in June of 1980. And on our way, we stopped in Switzerland to take care of a whole bunch of paperwork as far as being transitory and all that kind of stuff. And my brother and I saw the Iron Maiden for their first album in a record store in Switzerland, and we were just like, God damn, can you believe that? Look at this album cover. It's the most striking album cover ever. And so we knew that was a record that we'd have to pick up once we got to the States, and we did. And so all of and during the whole process of learning to love music, I was always kind of tuned in on what the drummer was doing. I was paying attention to what the drummers were doing in these bands. And so when we moved over here, we ended up in a studio apartment in the back of my grandparents' house in Queens.
Wow.
So it was three of us living in just one room. And obviously I couldn't have a drum set. So I ended up getting a guitar. And I'm still most comfortable playing guitar rather than drums, because it was the instrument that I started out at a young age. But, drums were always my passion. So I'm glad it ended up being this way, that I was able to make drums my actual career.
Yeah.
But
could I ask you a question here for a sec?
Yeah, sure.
So you said there was three of you in that studio apartment, but you'd also mentioned having a brother and then your two parents. So how did it end up being three people?
My father had to stay behind. He had to sell the house. He had to take care of a whole bunch of loose ends. He had to actually make his way out of Iran as just an Iranian citizen, because that's what he was at the time. Mm-hmm. It was difficult. He had to, jump through hoops to make it happen, but he was able to do it. It took him 2 years, but so we were in that studio apartment for 2 years, waiting for him to make his way over to the States, and he finally did.
What kind of impact did that have on you? Going into this small space, so living in a new country, very, very small space. Of course, there's lots of cool stuff to learn and experience, but you also, I would imagine, must have had a lot of challenges about not having your dad around and the cultural shift?
Actually, I mean, I guess maybe we were just kind of well adjusted. Like we were really excited actually to be in America for one thing, because me personally, I always felt like an American more than an Iranian, because I never really spoke the language well. And we always spoke English in the house. It was, you know what I mean? It was just like it was way more of my comfort zone was being in American culture. So, as far as the space goes, I think it's pretty funny because like that time of my life, I must have spent the most time I ever did outdoors, you know, because if I wasn't out riding my skateboard, I was out riding my bike. I immediately started going to high school. So I was out with friends, but I was out with friends like to a fault, you know, like my mom couldn't control me. And my mom basically, she didn't have like, I guess in a way, not having my dad around allowed me to just be like a wild man, you know, and just do whatever the hell I wanted to. And, you know, I don't think I made my mom worry all that much, you know, like I hope I didn't anyway. But I mean, she would complain, but it wasn't like she would yell at me or anything like that. It was always like a stern talking to about this or that. But for the most part, I was like out of the house for like those 2 solid years. I was just away. I was in Queens, just, you know, taking it all in and making friends.
All right. So what led you then from that? You know, you've moved to the country, you're having this kind of like 2 years of being a wild man out in the streets, but like it sounds like good natured.
And a bad student.
Right, and a bad student. So
yeah,
what
was getting worse and worse.
So what leads you to the punk scene then?
Just there was a guy that I met that lived like a couple of blocks away from me in Jamaica, Queens, who was into a lot of heavy metal stuff, as I was. You know, obviously, like I had the look, I had the long hair, I had the, you know, denim and leather and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, he saw me. I don't know exactly how we met. I think we met probably through one of my friends in high school, but he was already out of high school. So, but he lived close by. So we ended up just like making that a place where we would hang out. And he got his hands on the first Necro 7-inch. Right. I don't know if it was the first Necro 7-inch. It was IQ 32. And so that was like the first hardcore record that I ever heard. And, you know, that was, to me, it was like this wake up call of like, holy shit, everything doesn't have to be so precise and so pristine and so polished the way metal is. It could be just like this raw, emotional, like visceral thing as well, and have just as much impact and have possibly even more aggression. So I was all about it. That from there, I started listening to Noise the Show, which was, I think it was an NYU radio show that they had every week. And they were playing all kinds of stuff out of England, as well as like the stuff that was coming out of California, DC, Boston, New York, like whatever. All of like the punk rock and oi stuff that was getting popular around that time, they were playing. And that, you know, that had an impact on me. That kind of geared me towards what bands I was going to go out and look for in the record stores the next week. You know what I mean? And, you know, so it was always a search for that. It was always a search for the most aggressive music that I could find.
Okay. So you find the punk scene, you get involved in it, you find this kind of like new sound. And what I love about punk and hardcore, one of my favorite things is you can be like legitimately a crappy musician, but you could write the coolest song. Like,
yeah.
it's not so much about your skill as a musician, it's about your creativity and your ability to like create something like ferocious and powerful and impactful. But you get involved in that scene. Tell me about Sick of It All. But I'm interested in not just the beginning of Sick of It All, but when Sick of It All became a band that actually had a shot at doing it for real.
Well, that took a while. You know, that took a good 7 years. Like, you know, a lot of bands' careers don't even last that long, you know? So, you know, and I think one of the things that, one of the reasons why Sick of It All has had the longevity that we've had is the fact that we all met, like, you know, organically. We met in high school, going to shows, even like because I remember meeting up with Lou and Pete through a friend of mine, and this is even before we were in school together. I just kind of met them as neighborhood guys first, and then like the next semester, Lou and Pete were going to school with me. I was like, oh wow, these guys actually go to school here. This is cool. We could just hang out. And of course, what that meant was we could cut out of school every single day and just like, you know, waste our time and, you know, getting beers and whatever.
Right.
That was when those guys actually drank, when they were like,
Right.
you know, 15, 16.
Yeah.
But so, you know, basically Sick of It All came together just because, you know, anybody could play in a hardcore band. You didn't have to be some kind of great musician. We all knew this. And, you know, I had already started playing in Rest in Pieces like the year before. And Craig was already playing in New York City Mayhem. And, you know, Craig was also like one of our neighborhood friends. And so, you know, already like the band thing was starting to happen for us. And Lou and Pete wanted to make it happen for them too. So they put a band together. At first, I wasn't involved. It was a different drummer, this guy Dave, and there was this guy Mark Goober on bass, and they played their first show because Craig booked it, opening up for Youth of Today out at the Right Track Inn in Long Island. You know, so even though Craig wasn't in Sick of It All, he booked the first show at that point.
That's crazy, you know? Man.
Yeah. So, you know, but you know, there was a certain point where I found myself always you know, of course I was always hanging around with those guys. So they asked me questions. They, you know, and I had already started playing drums for Straight Ahead. That was like my first experience drumming. So I was like a total novice drummer, but I was just excited to play. And when Lou and Pete started getting songs together, they started sounding good, and like the fact that they were out there, the name was known, and they had the ball rolling. At a certain point, I don't really know what happened between Dave and them, but I just like stepped in as drummer. And then I don't know what happened between Mark Goober and them, but Rich Cipriano was on bass. And so that was the original Sick of It All lineup. That was what, you know, like when we recorded the demo, those were the four guys. And, you know, the only difference now is in 1993, Craig came in to replace Richie.
All right. There's so much that we could talk about here in this time frame. And, you know, for anyone listening, when I say Sick of It All, there's two things that always stand out to me. Sick of It All, when I first heard and like got Blood, Sweat, and No Tears, which is their first LP, when I first got that record and I looked at Sick of It All on there, I thought, these are the scariest people I've ever seen in my life. Like, I'm terrified. These guys each look like they had to fight through an army of skinheads to get to the show, to then play to those very skinheads. Like, it was like, but then when I was able to meet all of you years later, I thought, oh, these are just like very humble, like really, really nice people. And it was such an interesting contrast of like what you could think of when you're a kid and you get this record. Because I grew up in the middle of Canada in Calgary, and you know, there certainly I never would have thought I was going to see Sick of It All, let alone get a chance to meet all of you. So one, I've always been struck by Sick of It All really stands out to me as just being like just nice, normal guys, like really, really good guys. But the thing, the second thing, well, and I think it's part of what's like the lovability and the longevity of the band is you're just like real authentic, real people and just nice guys. But the other piece that stands out to me about Sick of It All, and I talked about this earlier, and I really want to start focusing on this now. You're one of the first bands that really was like, oh no, we're going to do this. And like, we're actually going to do this as like our art and our output. It's going to become what we do.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that crossroads and some of the pushback that you got around that time. But first, let me ask you, what did you think you were going to do? So when you were a kid and you weren't doing at school and you're good at school and you're out like being a wild man, what did you think you were going to do when you grew up?
I really didn't know. Of course, the whole time I really wanted to be a musician. That was like my ideal, job in life was to be a musician and have it pay the bills and just have me have that artistic expression and outlet in my life and everything. So, you know, but there were times also because my grades were so bad, I didn't end up going to college. But luckily, like right around the time that like I was considering college, Rest in Pieces started happening.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like that possibility that the music might have that impact on me, and luckily I didn't join the Marines when I had that idea in my head as well, because my friend
Right.
joined the Marines. I was thinking, maybe I should go with him, you know, and I'm glad I didn't do that because none of this would have ever happened. But so, you know, like I was just hopeful that music would be my path. And luckily it ended up being that way. I think it really has a lot to do with the fact that um, every time Sick of It All played a show, for example, we always gave it 110%. You know, I don't think anybody could ever take that away from us. Like that's one of the things about Sick of It All that nobody can deny, is the fact that like when we're doing it, we're wholeheartedly doing it.
Yeah.
And it's that energy and the chemistry of the four guys playing with each other that I think is like the magic that people can relate to, and like they want to be a part of, and all of that kind of stuff. It's like, I guess you know, I think that there is some kind of magic that is created when the four of us are playing together.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, luckily the way things turned out, like the timing of everything was just very much on our side, because hardcore hadn't been discovered in Europe at the time that we were first going over there. It was really very small, very, very underground still. The only hardcore bands, the only American hardcore bands that have been to Europe right before us were Youth of Today and Gorilla Biscuits, I believe. I mean, you know, besides the maybe like the bigger names like Dead Kennedys, Bad Religion, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But New York hardcore bands, or you know, anything like that, we were probably the third to make it over there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Youth of Today kind of dropped off, and then Gorilla Biscuits broke up, and then that kind of just left us as like the flag bearers for an entire scene.
Man, okay. I want to hit on this because I think this timing is super crucial. I did want to say something though. So I've been able to see Sick of It All like a ton of times, and I want to say I've seen you in humongous shows where every single living body in that room was only there to see Sick of It All, and the room was packed. It was like the room was full of gorillas, and you were holding all the bananas. Like it was like one of those scenarios. But I've also seen Sick of It All in rooms where it was like a very small crowd in a big, big room. And I never saw a difference between how Sick of It All played. The energy, the integrity, the intensity was always there. Big crowd, small crowd, all of it. And so I agree with you. I just want to hit on that because like the consistency of Sick of It All from era to era of the band has just been like really breathtaking and really important.
Thank you for noticing, you know, first of all. But like you know, that's one of the things that we always want to satisfy ourselves with what we're doing as well. It's not you know, so much about like it. Sure, if the audience is into it and everybody's going crazy, that's great. That makes for an awesome show. But if it's difficult and we have to pull teeth to get the audience to even react to us, you know, why deprive ourselves of the pleasure of playing music? You know, why put any less into it? If anything, sometimes you end up maybe putting a little extra exertion into what you're doing because you're angry, you know, like why don't these people wake up? You know, it's like, and it ends up working for us because we're an aggressive band that sings about frustrations. So, you know, like the more angry you are, sometimes the better it comes off.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the switch though, because there came a point where you know you were a band playing amongst a community of people. You're doing like maybe small tours up and down the East Coast. Put out your demo, put out your EP on Rev, but suddenly you're getting ready to put out an LP, and you actually start becoming kind of a front runner of not just that scene, but in hardcore you kind of become the band in a lot of ways, and you start getting some pushback. Now, of course, I'm talking about the infamous Sick of It All Born Against radio show, which I've got a lot. I could do a whole conversation with that. But more so what I'm interested in is like when you as a group, what was the the page that turned when you're like, no, we're going to do this band. Like, this is now what we're going to try and do as a living. What happened?
What happened was we actually started making money in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, money is the dictating factor as far as, you know, whether or not people devote their lives to being a musician or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you can make money doing it, and you start being able to actually pay the bills and not coming back home after a tour and needing to hold down a job in between tours, then, you know, why not do it? Why not like throw yourself into it? You know, it makes no sense to me when I see people that don't appreciate that gift, you know, because it is a gift to be able to play music for a living and to be able to express yourself, you know.
But man, that was like, it's such an interesting thing though, because you were surrounded by like top tier talent. Like, we're talking about an area that had Cro-Mags, Agnostic Front,
Leeway, yeah,
Youth of Today. Like, I mean, we were talking crazy heavy hitters. Sick of It All was the only band that went on to do this. So what was the differentiating factor? How did you guys figure out how to do a band for a living versus a band like Cro-Mags that were like, it seems like a band like Cro-Mags should have gone on to be like a legacy band that put out all these records, became like super rich, did whatever. But then they, you know, all the things that have happened there. What was the deciding factor that made you guys able to figure this out?
I think it's just the fact that we knew each other from high school. We were just friends before we were bandmates, you know, and that understanding and that like, you know, idea that nobody's ego is going to get the best of them and have them like ruin the entire thing. I think that's the difference between Sick of It All and definitely a band like Cro-Mags, because a band like Cro-Mags, I don't think they all necessarily grew up with each other. I don't think they all necessarily had a common vision of what the band was supposed to be. I think they had musical differences, artistic differences, like all of those kind of things. Of course, those are the reason why bands break up, you know? So luckily for us, we didn't have any of that. We just wanted to make music as, you know, in the best way we could with our limited capabilities. Like we were not technically great musicians or anything like that. We just wanted to play and have people react and have a good time doing it. And that was what we did. And we continued doing it, and we continued getting along as friends, as people, you know, and where other bands, I guess, maybe at a certain point couldn't stand being in the same room with each other, you know?
Well, and that stood out. Like when I spent time with Sick of It All, that stood out because you guys actually all hung out together, which was cool. Yeah. It was like really cool to see. But let's stick with something here. The band starts making money. So you've put out a record on In Effect, and like it comes out without the lyrics inside of it, and you did it so that your records could get out to more and more stores. And you start getting pushback from people. People are criticizing you for making a living off the band. What was that like for you?
Well, actually, the interesting thing is that the band we weren't even making a living off of it at that point. You know, the biggest amount of money that I made in playing with Sick of It All at that time, I think I came home with like $2,000 from that DRI tour that we did, you know, and that was in support of the first album. So, and then I had to go back and work a job, you know, like everybody had to come back and work a job because there wasn't like, we didn't have a management company behind us, like getting us this tour and, you know, followed by this tour, followed by that tour, followed by the other. And, you know, keeping the money coming in. We didn't have anything like that. It was still very much just the band making its own decisions.
Yeah.
And, you know, another thing about that pushback is the fact that they also were criticizing the band about being signed to a major label, but we weren't on a major label. We were on a big independent, you know. So just the fact that we were just gaining a little bit of success, I guess, and the fact that our records were available in malls, that was what was really bothering these people, because they wanted it to be their little scene. You know, they wanted it to be their little club. And, you know, we had bigger aspirations than that. We weren't so limited. We didn't want it to be just so small. We were kids going to CB's matinees that didn't feel like we belonged at first, because we were kind of like, from Queens or from Westchester, from the suburbs, like and then we were hanging out with these like super urban guys from like Harley and John, and they were like real urban kids, and so we felt like we were those people that were buying records in malls that that now we were catering to.
Mm-hmm.
And then we didn't want to take it away from them. We wanted to cater to whoever was interested in our music. We didn't want it to be limited to just a small amount of people in select cities across the country. We wanted it to be all encompassing, like a global phenomenon. So that's what we did.
Why did you want that?
Because we wanted our music to be heard.
Yeah, man.
We just wanted to reach people.
Can I speak from a fan perspective here?
Sure.
How I heard of Sick of It All was my friend Joey, who was not like, he wasn't like a hardcore guy necessarily. He's just like a young guy that was like a kind of an outsider dude. He somehow got a Sick of It All record in Calgary, Alberta when we were kids. And that record changed my life. Blood, Sweat, No Tears.
Yeah? In Calgary,
hands down.
huh?
Yeah, hands down changed my life. So that's why when I listened to that Sick of It All, Born Against conversation, I was kind of like, man, like the point of making those records available to a wider spectrum of people, like that probably had huge positive impact on people's lives. I know it did for me. I would not be going down the path I was going down had that record not been available in like whatever ridiculous like retail store.
Well, so, I mean, you got to think about it. Like, we weren't idiots. I mean, everybody read Maximum Rock and Roll. We all saw the small towns that these bands were coming out of. Like it wasn't everything. Everything wasn't from a major city. Everything wasn't from like some of the most genius bands were coming out of these small towns. And the only way to get to get hardcore music heard in those small towns is to make it widely available. So, we were just doing that.
All right. So you've got this like great friendship with these guys. You've come up with them. You're not making a living yet, but you're getting national recognition, maybe even international recognition. But at some point, you leave Sick of It All.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend who was bummed out at the feeling of watching me go away on tour and all that kind of stuff. So she convinced me to actually leave the band. At that point, the band, I was more focused on Rest in Pieces for those first few years that I was involved with Sick of It All. So Rest in Pieces was really my passion. I was helping out with Sick of It All and like, still writing music for him and stuff and helping him out with the songwriting that they were doing. But Rest in Pieces was really where I was putting all my eggs, and so I listened to this girl like an idiot, and I ended up working, at least I ended up staying in the industry, but on the business side of things, I ended up working as a publicist for In Effect Records.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like the whole Relativity umbrella, which it was like Combat Core, Combat Records. There were a few other labels that were part of that Relativity umbrella, but like In Effect was one of them. So I was still involved with Sick of It All, but on the record label side.
So did you have friends try and talk you out of it?
At that point, not really. I don't know. Maybe people did. I don't. Maybe I just refused to listen. Because I was young and I was stupid, and I wanted to do the 9-to-5 job with a girlfriend thing for a while. But then I quickly realized that wasn't for me, and I really started questioning how right we were for each other, and I really started thinking about how right it was for me to play music for a living instead.
So how'd you get back in the band?
I got a call from Pete, when they started working on writing music for Just Look Around, I got a call from Pete just saying, Armand, do you want to join again? We're going to start working on a new record. It would be great if you could just be a part of it. And I was just like, hell yeah, let's do this. And And I got along really well with Richie. Richie was like a great guy to write music with because he was just so funny. Like you would actually like come up with, you would get songs out of him fucking around in the studio, just like making fun of this person or that person. Like there would be a riff somehow created from that would become an entire song. And like, just like those processes of, creativity with Richie were just so much fun that like, of course I was excited to be back in there and being a part of it again. And, Just Look Around came together really well, I think. And even back then we were being very experimental, even touching on very experimental topics in hardcore, like, like back then the AIDS pandemic and just like what the gay community was going through, dealing with it. And, like other bands at that point were not talking about that kind of stuff. And it was happening all around us. So why not write a few songs about it? So we did, and Just Look Around is like kind of an important record, I think, because it touches on those topics.
I believe Just Look Around, and I'm not sure if I've got this right from the Sick of It All side of things. I think Just Look Around is like deep classic hardcore record.
Oh,
specifically like from, let's say, like Just Look Around, the song. You take that song and you talk about our world today.
Oh yeah.
Like that is like that song is like it's like clearly, like, I mean, you could take those lyrics and put that out today and people would be like, oh yeah, like that's literally what's going on. Nobody, first time I heard that song, I was like, oh my, like I was like a little kid and I was like, holy crap, that's like, I felt it was like super edgy and like really direct and clear. The video is stark, kind of blends styles a little bit. It's like clearly like a hardcore song, but yet it has a little bit of a like almost like
metal.
rapish metal
thing.
The
hip hop
like,
little thing. That's
it's
true.
like it's an interesting mix. Like that song touches on so many genres, and it's but it's also super edgy. That whole record, I believe, is classic. Now, tell me though, within the Sick of It All camp, do you guys all like that record?
Yeah, I think. I mean, some of the songs go on too long. I think if we were given a chance to like go back in time and redo it, we would have cut some of the lengths of the songs down a touch and maybe not gotten quite as far out there with some of the parts, because like I know the ending of the song The Pain Strikes is really just kind of odd. It's almost like surf punk, so there were certain things that we would have probably done differently, but overall, I mean, there's an energy to it. I think it had a really good bite to it. Like you said, it was like in your face and direct, so I think we were all really happy with it at the time. And I think it's like stood the test of time really well, especially with what you said about the lyrics for Just Look Around.
I mean, like I still get chills when I hear that song. I actually recall there was a person that I was dating at the time heard me listening to that record, and she was like, ew, this is like rap metal. And I remember thinking, I don't think it's going to work out. Anyways, all right, let's talk about some more straight up business stuff. Because like, what are, from your perspective, like I said earlier, I truly believe in my heart, Sick of It All was the first hardcore band that really figured it out, how to make your band a living while staying hardcore and not being corny and not making stupid choices that like were like ethically compromising. You started a hardcore band, you're still a hardcore band. I think easily one of the top 5 most important hardcore bands historically. So what were some of the hardest lessons you and the band learned about being a business and doing a business the way you want to do it? What are like some of the hard lessons?
Well, I mean, I don't really know like the hard lessons, that would really kind of make it seem like we went through really rough patches. And I don't think we ever really went through rough patches. I mean, we got dicked around by promoters. We got dicked around maybe by like some like merch company here or there or something like that. But basically our career has been pretty solid, and we've been lucky in that we've known people who gave us good advice back before we knew how to operate as a business. And we also had people around us, like, for example, Stormy Shepherd being our booking agent in the States. Like, she has a really good head on her shoulders. She has been able to help us along, ever since 1993. Mark Nickel from MAD in Europe, he was really like a big part of what made Sick of It All, especially in Europe, which was like such a big part of our career, like being able to get like borderline like mainstream success in Europe.
Yeah.
And I think Mark played a big part in that. And he's like, and he comes from old punk rock and everything like that. So it's never like we found ourselves sitting down with the wrong people to do business with, or to represent us in business. Luckily, we always found the right people to do that kind of talking for us. And at a certain point, I guess once we were able to feel that we could do it for ourselves, we had learned a lot of the important lessons that bands should know. Like, for example, pay publishing money equally to all the guys. Publishing money and wives or girlfriends are the two biggest things that will break a band up. And I heard that advice back like right around the time that Sick of It All was becoming like nationally known, and it made a big impact on me. And that's why, and I had already experienced losing friends and feeling really bad about it and having a lot of regret coming out of Rest in Pieces, because I became quickly a musical dictator in that band. And I learned the error of my ways back then in like the late 80s. So I knew going into Sick of It All's career to avoid some of those pitfalls.
Can I ask you a Rest in Pieces question?
Sure.
How representative of your current style is the back cover of the Rest in Pieces LP?
Oh, you mean like the Under My Skin record? You know what? The funny thing is, like, you would think that I dressed up for that shot. I didn't dress up for that shot. That was literally those were my working clothes.
Did everybody show up in their like normal clothing for that shoot?
The only guy Rob's big like leather trench coat. That was something that he got his hands on and he was excited to wear for the pictures and everything. So, but Craig borrowed my pants, my windbreaker for that shoot. And then I just wore my same clothes that I did. Craig and I were working as furniture movers in Queens at that time. And I wore that hat and I had the camo jacket. And, it was just like that. That was how I dressed going to work every day. So for me, it's really not that embarrassing. Like I think about it.
I don't think it's embarrassing. I think it's the sickest band photo of like I want the world to dress like that right now, every day. All right, let's keep going. I got a couple more questions for you. So I believe you were the first person in the band to have a kid, to have a family, right? Like,
yeah.
So did that change the game for you?
Not at all. Actually, it's pretty interesting because like thinking back because at the beginning of this lockdown and everything, like last year, right before the lockdown happened, we ended up getting a puppy, right? And the puppy was a lot of work, a lot of responsibility, a lot of like, you can't do what you want to do because there's this puppy, and I think back and I'm like, well, I had kids back in 1998 and 2000 and they were toddlers all the way through the, maybe mid 2000s. I mean, the aughts, so it's interesting that I was able to be so musical back then, and lately I haven't been all that musical. Maybe I'm just getting old, I don't know. But and also another thing is, like, anytime I pick up a guitar, I write something, it doesn't sound like Sick of It All, so I've been working on music, but I don't know how much of it is going to end up as Sick of It All songs. But going back to those days, my wife and I were very careful. We thought about what the band was up to. We had windows of time to get pregnant, and if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. But luckily, both times we had these windows, they both worked. So and we were able to. I was able to be home for at least the first few months of both of my kids' lives, be there for the birth, be there for all of the difficult times while my wife was, still pregnant and uncomfortable, So I really didn't alter the band's career at all. Like, if there was anything that we ever turned down, it might have been like a weekend of this, a weekend of that. And, there were probably pretty good weekends, like, opening up for some pretty big bands, but it didn't really make a huge difference to what the band did. And I feel like a sense of accomplishment, putting that much time and effort into not like screwing these guys over because I wanted to have a family.
The thing that seems to stand out to me, or not seems to, the thing that is standing out for me in your story, there doesn't seem to be a lot of doubt at any point. That was just like, yeah, we're gonna do this, and I just have faith it's gonna work out.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. It's maybe it's because I'm such like a perfectionist that like as far as music goes, if something's wrong, it's not going to get released, And me being my own worst critic, I guess I keep a certain level of quality control, operating at all times that makes it that way. That it kind of gives me the confidence to make those kind of calls,
Mm-hmm. So what about Sick of It All from like a relationship point of view? Was there ever almost a breaking point between all of you, or has it always just been like, no matter what, we're going to keep it going?
There was one time where the band almost broke up, but that was personal kind of stuff that I'd rather not really go into.
Mm-hmm.
But it was worked through, and it's still fine until today. That was like a really strange time in the band's career, but we worked through it, and we're just kept chugging forward.
Right on, man. All right, so what about for bands coming up today? Because the game has changed a lot since the 80s when you were playing, and now bands can kind of easily make a living off of music. And I think there's some good stuff with that. I think there's some bad stuff with that. I remember there was a turning point where I was able to, for a short window of time, like live off of music. And it was cool and also kind of awful at the same time. Like there was good stuff and there was bad stuff about it.
What kind of awful stuff?
The awful was that you had to you were only able to make a living off of how good your next thing was. So there was this like constant
You felt stress.
Stress. Like I remember putting out like an LP and just being like, I don't know, like I have to make the next LP has to be as good, if not better. And this sense of like urgency about it. But also the other thing was that like so much of it was tied to touring, and that if you weren't on tour, because it doesn't work like normal music. Well, I guess normal music has now kind of matched what punk and hardcore is in a lot of ways. It's that touring was how you made your money, and without touring, you were screwed. But like touring meant that you weren't around your friends, your family, and you were kind of like constantly on the road. And it was tough because we didn't have what you had. We didn't all get along. Like, I mean, it was like actually quite unpleasant. Yeah. Like, it could be pretty unpleasant.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's like when you talk about like your average band, people get together through confidential ads and newspapers and stuff like that. They meet through friends. Sometimes they have absolutely no idea what their backgrounds are, and whether or not they're going to mesh creatively or even just personally, is like their personalities, their idiosyncrasies, all those kind of things come into play so much because you're in such close quarters with these people and for such long periods of time and through such emotional roller coasters that that's what touring is. Touring is like an emotional roller coaster sometimes because you have great joy and you have great sorrow, and it's like all in the matter of just a few hours. And there's a lot of people can't take that. A lot of people don't have the the mental toughness to be able to handle that kind of thing. You have to be kind of level headed and just committed to the cause.
Yeah. You could literally not pay me enough money to go on a 6-week tour. I would never ever do that again in my life.
Really?
No, like 2 weeks in a heartbeat. I'd have no problem. I would never go on a 6-week tour again. All right. But what advice do you have for bands now, like young bands who are like, yeah, I want to go for this. I want to make this happen.
Just, I guess, make your music available no matter what. Like, try not to feel the stress about, you know, topping the last thing you put out so much. You know, don't stress out about anything. Just let things happen naturally, and you know, if it works, it works. It's really not up to you. It's up to the world whether or not they make that connection with you or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, just keep doing what you're doing and don't worry about it.
So to me, and again, like I'm thinking about your story, there just seems to be so much like, yeah, like I trust this. I just, we're going to make it or we're not going to make it, but there doesn't seem to be a ton of doubt in your story. Like you're going to work hard, you're going to focus on it, you're going to put out your best thing you can. But you and Sick of It All just doesn't seem to be a story of like a lot of deep fear and a lot of deep doubt, but more of a lot of like hopefulness and belief in yourself and just being like, leave doubt on the sidelines and just keep pushing forward. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that the band is limited as far as our appeal goes. You know, we're not a band that's ever going to appeal like the way a mainstream act could, because Lou can't carry a tune the way a regular singer can. He's a screamer. He's got that intense scream, which is good for us, but we know that there's like a ceiling. So we knew very early on, like when certain bands were overtaking us in popularity, it's because they had these choruses. They had these like, hooks, and that they could they could become like the next big radio band just because of that hook. Even though they're like seriously heavy, they could be super big. Mm-hmm. But with us, we don't have those qualities. So we knew that to keep our expectations kind of low, and just like, if there is a ceiling, just bump into that ceiling as much as we can, fly right up to it, bump into it as much as possible.
But there seemed like moments where you almost broke through. Like, in Europe, you basically broke through. But there seemed like in North America, a lot of moments, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, where you were like a song away from like becoming a mainstream band.
I don't know. I mean, I never really felt that.
Dude, Step Down? When Step Down came out?
Yeah, I mean, there was a chance, like, but it didn't happen. Yeah, even getting Beavis and Butthead even liked it, and like at that time, having a positive reaction by Beavis and Butthead, I was thinking to myself, oh shit, is this really going to happen? Like, are we going to get a whole lot bigger because of this? And it didn't happen. We were just still on the Warped Tour and, doing the same thing as we always did.
Yeah, like it seems like Sick of It All has hit a certain spot, but has stayed comfortably in that spot. It's not like you're like scratching and clawing to stay there, but nor are you like going to like push past it. You've kind of taken your place, and that place is like a healthy place, and you guys seem pretty comfortable with it.
Well, it's we always have the thing about us being older as well in the back of our minds. So, luckily we've always had the right attitude on stage, always make every show as good as it can be. And I think that prevents us from ever really looking all that old on stage. And, I'm hoping that when we do really, really look old on stage, people will give us a pass because we've always tried so hard. And we will probably still try really hard when we're looking super old, so, every few years there's like a new generation of hardcore kids that comes around, and for us to appeal to them is a challenge, because a lot of like young hardcore kids, they want a band from their generation. They want it to be their thing. They don't necessarily want to become historians and look into 30, 40 years ago at the roots of the music and like, where did this style come from, or where did that kind of vocal styling come from, or anything like that. Because now, when I was young, all I had to do is go back like 10 years to the Stooges, and that was like pretty much the birth of the style of music. And even that for me, I was like, I was, I love the Stooges, don't get me wrong, but like it wasn't like I didn't want to make music that sounded like the Stooges. I wanted to make music that sounded like the Blitz, and Negative Approach. So it was a different thing altogether, and that kind of thing is still happening. You still have all the younger kids that want a band to be representative of them, of their perspectives, not necessarily of the old guys who started the music scene.
Yeah. So there are a lot of bands that came up that were like juniors to you, younger bands that went on to go to pretty great heights. I think a band like Rancid, band like AFI, bands like that. And you played a role in getting them some attention early on.
Mm-hmm.
How has it felt for you as a musician, creative force within the scene to help people out and then to watch them exceed your level of, let's say,
of success?
Well, yeah, of success. But, success is a questionable word because I look at success as happiness. Like, are you happy with what you do and how well you've done it versus monetary or kind of recognized success? So I don't know any of those guys. Let's just say they've become more successful on like they're more recognized, and, that's how I'd look at it. So how does that feel?
Well, I mean, all of those people, any band that we ever toured with that went on to bigger things, they were always such sweethearts that we were just happy for them, and we've kept in touch with them. And we're, like you could say that about Rise Against as well. Rise Against was a band that we took out on their first European tour, and they shared a bus with us, and they were just such nice guys. And we all got along so well that, like, what came later was, everybody was just happy for them and happy for their success and their ability to make music their life and make it like do so well, like the fact that we do have these low expectations, maybe it does kind of stifle us in a way. Who knows? I don't really know if it does stifle Sick of It All, but we don't necessarily feel bad about other people doing well.
Yeah.
Maybe if we encountered a band that were complete assholes that then went on to be super ginormous, then it would be a different story. But everybody that we've toured with that has been that way have been really, really nice guys that are humble, come from the same scene that we did, and have all the same passions about the music that we do. So I don't know. I guess it would be different if they were jerks, but we're lucky.
Yeah, man. And again, like the storied career of Sick of It All, it keeps going. Like I'm always like, damn, like what's next for you guys? Because you've done it all. You've basically done it all. But there always seems to be some other thing that you figure out how to do. And you've kept it interesting. You've kept people people love Sick of It All. Like I love Sick of It All. And I love to see that continued success. As we're starting to get towards the end of the interview, I wanted to ask you, like if I think of my own career, I could think of a few people who were like seminal in helping me go on to achieve things. So when we think of Sick of It All, who are some of the people that you could say have played like a crucial role in helping you guys become the band that you are today?
Well, it's definitely, as far as the business side goes, like I already talked about like our booking agents being so helpful in our career. But there was a guy that was my roommate in the early 90s. And he ended up, and actually he had hired me to work at In Effect Records under him in the press department of In Effect Records. And so I was working for him, and then I ended up becoming a roommate with him. And then for a number of years, he was just there watching what was happening with Sick of It All, watching the band become bigger, get the success in Europe. And, he was always helpful. He was always super helpful. And for a little while, I felt like he was almost like the fifth member of the band, because he was coming up with ideas and giving us feedback about the way we're doing things, and and even kind of like stringing relationships together between us and other bands and other music companies, other merchandise companies. He was like the catalyst for a lot of different things. And then at a certain point, he just said, I'm doing all this stuff for you guys. Why don't I just become your manager? And that was Steve Martin, who runs a place called Nasty Little Man Publicity.
Yeah, and he's gone on to do quite well for himself.
Oh yeah. I mean, he started as he almost like started as a success. It was crazy. Like one of his first clients, I think, was Helmet, and then Helmet blew up, and then just like he just went on to do like the Beastie Boys, and like now he's working with Paul McCartney, and like it's just, and the Foo Fighters, so he's like a really super successful guy. But he was able to really kind of help us out with the business side of things when we were still kind of learning the ropes. And I definitely wanted to mention his name.
Yeah. I do have a couple more questions since we got some time here. Is that okay with you?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All right. I want to hit from label to label to label, and you can tell me like what that experience was like for you.
Okay.
So, Revelation, you're a young band, you put out an EP on Rev. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, they were the label that like really helped us gain a foothold in the scene, because being able to be on that comp and do our own EP through them was the reason why we were able to get a deal with In Effect. I don't think, who knows what would have happened if we hadn't gotten an In Effect deal. Our first album would probably have been on Revelation as well. Mm-hmm. But everything was always cool. Jordan was always a super understanding, really cool guy, still is, and very, very supportive of the bands that he works with. So incredible guy.
Okay. In Effect.
Yep. In Effect was also a cool experience. Howie Abrams was the guy that actually signed the band. And I think he did a really good job. He always fought for the band, even though he had higher ups to answer to all the time that didn't necessarily agree with everything that he wanted to do. But he was from the scene. He understood the scene, and he knew what Sick of It All should be. So, he was always like very helpful and fought for us, trying to get the money to do certain things and the backing from the label to do certain things.
All right. Relativity.
Well, same thing. That's the same time as In Effect.
Yeah. So was it In Effect got folded underneath it, or did it rebrand? Like, what was the difference there?
It was a subsidiary. We were never actually on like Relativity Records proper.
Mm-hmm. So Relativity, for Just Look Around, it was really just In
was
Effect.
It? Well, I thought it was just In Effect Records.
Do you want me to go grab my LP? Can I grab my LP?
I don't know. But anyway, it like even
it was essentially just In
Relativity,
Effect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's probably that because it was the same people anyway involved with both albums.
So it was 3 releases. It was the 2 LPs and an EP in between. They were all on In Effect.
Yeah, that experience was kind of like we had the right guys working with us, but the people that they had to answer to weren't the right people.
Okay. So East West.
East West was very positive. It started out really well. Too bad it didn't last, because once things changed to Elektra, it was altered in a kind of negative way. East West, we had an A&R guy that really got the band. He was really super excited about everything. It threw tons of money at us, so we were like, we couldn't believe what we were living. And so that was great. It was a lot of fun. And I think they did an amazing job for Scratch the Surface in Europe. Not necessarily so much in the States, but in Europe, they did an incredible job. And then Built to Last happened, and it was the reverse. In Europe, they dropped the ball. In America, they did a great job, but that was Elektra. And I don't even know if I think we lost our A&R guy. Once you lose your A&R guy, then your whole experience with the label is kind of going to go up in flames, because to find another person who really wants to work with you is difficult. as opposed to you being handed to somebody else. Here, this is your project now,
Mm-hmm.
even though they had no passion for it,
Yeah.
So that's the way things go in a major label. It's like if you lose your A&R guy, you're screwed.
Okay. Fat Records.
Fat Records was always incredible to deal with. Fat
Mm-hmm.
Records, Fat Mike totally has his heart in the right place. Absolutely, no doubt about it. He wants to see all his friends succeed. He wants to see everybody play music. He wants them to make a living doing it. I've never met a more like supportive guy from the industry than Fat Mike. So only problem was Fat Records didn't have the presence in Europe that we so desperately needed. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why after a few albums, and we noticed that things were just falling off album by album in Europe, that we needed to sign to a European-based label.
All right. So Century Media.
Century Media has been a very, very positive experience since day one. Like they've always given us tremendous support. I think maybe the first couple of years were a little bit better for us because Rob, the guy who actually signed us, he was like our A&R guy. Plus, he was one of the heads of the label.
Mm-hmm.
So working with him was incredible. But then he ended up leaving, like he ended up selling his part of the company. Both guys, I think, the two original owners ended up selling their parts of the company. But we've been very lucky with the people that have ended up working with us. Like, for example, there's a lady named Melanie out of Germany that deals with us. And I think she's done a fantastic job. And she always comes and says hi to us on every tour and spends at least sees us at at least one show, or if not more.
That's cool, man. So as we're wrapping up here, I got a couple of fun questions for you.
Okay.
Okay, tell us the story about doing backups for Gorilla Biscuits.
Oh yeah. I can't really remember exactly how that came together. I think it was just that somebody, because we're always hanging out together anyway, so we were all hanging out together in the city. I think maybe somebody got a call or somebody just knew beforehand that Gorilla Biscuits were doing this, gang vocal thing at a certain day down at Don Fury. So we all just headed down there, and ended up Ray Capo was there as well, and there were like Purcell was there. It was like a few other random people from the hardcore scene that like all kind of converged on this one studio, and it was so much fun. It was just like, because it's always great hanging out with the Gorilla Biscuits guys, and we always just joke around so much, and it's always a big laugh, and then to have Ray Capo in there, and he was dancing around and like just cracking everybody up, and it was just like a really awesome day of just hanging out and making putting some gang vocals down on a seminal hardcore record.
Absolute seminal. Huge shout out to Gorilla Biscuits. Obviously a celebrated band and people within the scene. All right, fun questions now. Rat Scabies or Mackie?
Oof. You mean on my style?
Yep.
I have to go with Rat Scabies because I'm not as good as Mackie. I'm not. If I was a better drummer, I could say Mackie, but I'm more Rat Scabies. I'm more just like smash the shit out of your cymbals and make it as driving as you can, without much technical ability, and that's more like Rat Scabies.
All right, Tommy Ramone or Marky Ramone?
Tommy Ramone or Marky Ramone? I'm going to say Marky Ramone.
Okay. Robo or Chuck Biscuits?
Chuck Biscuits.
Right,
Chuck Biscuits was always, I respected that guy's skill a lot. Even with the early like circle jerk stuff, like he was so fun to watch. And then him joining Social D, like being able to tour with him when he was in Social D, that was awesome. Just to be able to watch him play every day.
Okay. Double pedal or two kick drums?
uh, uh, double pedal.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I appreciate two kick drums, but it's just too cumbersome.
all right. So I got a question for me, and then a question that's going to satiate my curiosity, and then a question that I think you'll have some fun with. And so these are the last two questions. So three un, three New York hardcore, or even just from that area, bands that didn't get enough love. They never got their just due.
Um, Adrenaline OD
Mm-hmm.
from New Jersey, Mental Abuse also from New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna go I'm gonna say Leeway, because Leeway, Born to Expire was such an important record, which really shaped the way a lot of bands wrote. It was shelved for a good 2 years.
It's
It was
crazy.
recorded and shelved for like a good 2 years before it saw the light of day. And in those 2 years, it really made a big difference on what every other New York band did. And they had a big part in shaping what New York hardcore sounded like. And just like they made everybody's game had to be like here when it was here before.
Yeah.
So, Leeway is just one of those bands. Like, I don't think they get the credit they're due.
All right. And then this is the question for you, not for me, because, I am a straight edge dude, but I know my man Armand is a big beer fan.
Oh
So,
yeah.
all right, tell me right now, right off the top of your head, top three beers that you're drinking right now that you're loving.
Well, I mean, I like my favorite beers, like my house beers. Weihenstephaner from Germany. They have a beer called Vitus, or Vitus. I don't know how you say it in German, but it's a Weizenbock, but it's
Mm-hmm.
pale in color.
Mm-hmm.
Nice kind of banana flavor to it, clove on the nose, and it's delicious. Uh, I would say Founders Porter is always like a really, really solid go-to beer, and I'm going to go with a big one. I'm going to go with Cigar City Hunapu,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a really strong imperial stout, and it's just like it's cut with a bunch of like Mexican chocolate kind of flavors, which just take it to another level.
Dude, I love it. It's funny because you said, "Oh, a house beer." I don't know what like. I like that it has a category. Oh well, let's talk about house beers. That's not like my walking around beers. Just the house beer.
We house beers. It's like something that you always want to have around. You always want to have it just like within reach.
I love it, man. I love it. All right, listen, Armand. This has been such a cool conversation. I could talk to you for hours and hours about like. Obviously, I could geek out with you just about Sick of It All, because I mean the impact of that band in my life has just been huge, huge, huge. But also like there's just the business side. And as we're closing off, I just want to thank you, man. Like you guys have been such a huge inspiration to so many people, and it's like so many people have been able to do their passion in a way that allows them to kind of live off of their passion because of you. And you really, from my perspective, created that blueprint. We got into that a little bit today, and the
Well,
more we
we were
talked,
also a little lucky in the timing of the grunge scene. The
yeah,
grunge scene, and all of those the 100% creative control contracts being signed in right before we ever talked to a major. Those were the bands that kind of set the pace for us being able to dictate our own careers. You
mm,
know, and so we never went into it like a slave to somebody else's vision.
right, right, and of course for bands before you guys, that was like a huge issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the grunge bands being able to make that breakthrough and be able to create the norm in the industry being 100% creative control had a lot to do with us being able to always call the shots and not have some like cigar chomping dude, telling us what we should do or what we should sound like.
Totally, man. All right, any last words as we're closing off today?
Just want to always give my love to all of the fans out there of Sick of It All, of my music, whether it be Rest in Pieces, Straight Ahead, whatever. Um, everybody has kept us doing this, and it's been a beautiful thing seeing everybody support the band throughout this last year, because our income has been completely cut off. So seeing people still buying all the merchandise that they have, even donating money to us, through Spotify, for example, like those kind of things have helped us tremendously. We're still struggling, but we have like a little bit of like financial security because of that. And, we're really, really grateful to all the people that have done that for us.
Well, and as we're closing off here, my gratitude and all of the younger generation's gratitude to Sick of It All. Without you guys, I don't know where we'd be. I can't think of a band who really set up the structure of what hardcore can be from a like productive community in a way like you guys did. So
thank you, man. I appreciate you noticing that and bringing it up and making it such a topic of this conversation, because normally nobody really wants to talk about business, and thinking back, and like you said, a lot of the earlier bands that we looked at as our influences, they didn't have their business side held down at all. So yeah, maybe I never really thought about it, but I guess you're right.
Right on, man. Okay, listen, fantastic talking to you. And Dave, drop the beat. Armand, thank you so much for being on the show. I could talk for hours about Sick of It All and get into all the records and dissect all the songs. That's not the value of this conversation. The value is, how do 4 kids figure it out to make their creative pathway their living? And that's such a cool story. Again, like, I can see bands today doing what they're doing because Sick of It All did it first. So huge shout out to them. The other piece I want to say as we're closing up here, this is a story of a band pushing the limits of creativity, of what kind of expression you can make in the scene, but also how you do a business. Like doing business, like the word business is almost like a bad word sometimes when you are in the creative space. That's ridiculous, because the whole idea here is you're putting things out there for people to consume. And unless you're going to do it just for free, then there's going to be some kind of a business side to it. Why not be really conscious of it and do it not just in a good way, but in the best way possible? And Sick of It All, again, constantly pushing the limits, finding not just a way to do it, but the best way to do it. So massive shout out to them, continuing inspiration. And for anyone out there who is not just a creative, but trying to figure out their path in business and figuring out how they want to make a living, push the limits. What is doesn't have to be what will be. You get to decide that, but you decide that through your blood, your sweat, and your no tears. All right, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And as we're closing off, I want to remind you that we're produced by Patrick McKechnie, we're edited by Dave Larson, and our design is by Tammy Levy. All right, so we will see you next time on One Step Beyond.